Welcome to Scoop and Scale, where we dish up the science and weigh the facts about mostly equine nutrition. I'm Jill Jackson, lifelong equestrian, podcast producer, and pony owner. I'm a dressage rider and at-home horse keeper, living the challenge of managing easy keepers on multiple acres of pasture.
And I'm equine nutrition consultant, Dr. Claire Tunis of Clarity Equine Nutrition. I develop diet plans for horses ranging from metabolic seniors to Olympic athletes. I also consult for equine nutrition companies. I'm a scientist, dressage rider, and pony club mom.
Claire and I have been horse friends for almost 20 years, and like all good horse friends, we're always talking horses. We talk about the challenges of managing our horses, our riding struggles, feeding horses, and what's going on in the wider equine community. This podcast is a place for us to have conversations mostly about equine nutrition. It's for anyone who wants to make better choices when it comes to feeding their horses.
And before we get started, a quick disclaimer. The information in this podcast is general and not meant to replace the individualized advice of your own qualified equine nutritionist or veterinarian. And while I have a PhD in nutrition, I'm not a veterinarian and can't give medical advice.
With that, thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the following episode.
While driving today, I was listening to the radio and an interview about the searing heat in Kentucky and that it's causing a crisis there. They're being especially hard hit because many were also impacted by recent flash flooding over the last weekend. The governor has declared a state of emergency. And meanwhile, in Colorado, numerous fires have started in recent days and evacuations are in process. The reality is that summer in the United States is natural disaster season. Hurricanes and tornadoes have been on the radar for certain areas of the country for many years. And while devastating wildfires and flooding used to be relatively rare, their frequency is becoming more common and their size alarming. Every year, horse owners somewhere in the country are impacted by these natural disasters. So we thought it would be timely to spend some time today talking about how you can best be prepared to handle these events should they ever happen in your backyard rather than on your television. Jill, what our listeners may not be aware of is that you seem to have a bit of a habit of living in areas prone to natural disasters. It's like you're like, what area has a natural disaster? Let's move there. Can you share a little bit about your firsthand experiences you've had with natural disasters in the last, 15 years?
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about where I've lived. I left one off of here because I didn't put earthquakes, but we'll just leave that one out. But I lived in Arizona where we had in the summer dust storms and haboobs, which is just a massive dust storm. You're living there now, so you know what that is all about. And
yeah, I think of the haboobs as, they're dangerous if you're driving, right? Otherwise, I think of them as just being annoying. Although certainly you get microbursts with haboobs that can, we don't have particularly strong barns here, right? We have just sort of pipe corrals with sheet metal roofs oftentimes. And so sometimes barns' roofs will get ripped off and, our structures are not substantial. Our outside structures are often not super substantial.
Right.
So if you get a microburst, yeah, for sure. But I never really thought about haboobs as being sort of a natural disaster. But you've definitely done some real natural disasters.
Yeah, when I lived in Connecticut, I participated in Hurricane Irene and Hurricane Sandy.
It sounded like you just kind of like, that'll be a fun thing to do this weekend.
Yes, in Illinois, we had tornadoes, and then Colorado, wildfires all the time. I also lived through a bomb cyclone there, which is like a snow hurricane.
Oh.
Which is another interesting weather event. And now I'm in Iowa, back to tornadoes and a new one to me, which is derechos, which is a land hurricane. So that's also an interesting.
How is that different from a tornado?
Because a tornado turns and a derecho is straight line winds.
Oh, interesting. Oh, I already learned something. We have barely started.
All about weather.
Okay, so I just have to say, like, when you went through Irene, I don't know if it was Irene or Sandy. You were without power. You were really hit by those. You were without power for days.
Shout out to anybody that lives in Connecticut that understands about electricity in Connecticut and the lack thereof when there's any type of disaster. But I don't remember if it was Sandy or Irene. We went 16 days without electricity. Yeah. Most people go 48 hours, 72 hours, maybe 16 days.
Yeah,
with
it's
no
quite a long
power.
time.
Yeah,
And I mean, you've been, I mean, joking, like you've been very lucky because you've not personally had like your home destroyed or anything like that. So, you know, I mean, we say you've been involved and you've definitely lived in areas where these things have hit and lived 16 days without power. But I just want to be clear. I mean, you've been lucky in that you haven't, you know.
Super fortunate, knock on wood, though. I feel like maybe you just jinxed me.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Well, that's good. You're going to be, after this episode, you're going to be prepared. I mean, you're already prepared, but like, yeah, you're going to.
Right.
So on the back end of your experiences with the wildfires in Colorado, you started volunteering for an emergency group there and have continued to do so despite moving to Iowa 4 years ago. So what does this group do and how is it you can still help them even though you live in Iowa? You don't even live in Colorado.
Yeah, I honestly find it easier living here, helping them than I do living there because when you're there, it's a little bit more panicked because it's, you know, sometimes it's potentially really close to you. And obviously, you know, people that are potentially affected by it. But it's a grassroots community and it's a network for people who are in need of emergency evacuation of any type of livestock. We have 6,000 members. And when evacuations get issued, we put up a post on Facebook with the information about the fire. And then at that time, once our post goes up, anybody, and we do this to keep the page organized so it doesn't get chaotic, anybody that can offer assistance can post on our post in the comments with how they can assist, whether they can take animals in, whether they have trailers to come and pick people up. And then we only allow people to post that actually need help. So they need to post how many animals they have, what type of help they need, their address and their phone number. And then we will, you know, people can volunteer at that point to go out and help them, or we have a large spreadsheet that is mapped out so we can find somebody nearby that has offered assistance and we can reach out to them and ask them if they can go and help them. Once they are issued, we also look at where the fires are and we'll start contacting large facilities and let them know that there's a fire in their area in case those trainers or barn managers aren't paying attention to their phones. Maybe they're riding, maybe they're in lessons, you know, and give them a heads up that there is evacuations or pre-evacuations in the area. And then we'll also find out if they need assistance and start calling other barns and other people that we have on our list to head over.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're going to do this as a two-part conversation. Today we're talking about preparing for the event. I think next time we'll actually have some conversations around what actually happens when a disaster goes down, and it can become very chaotic. And I think we have some advice for people on how to try to keep everyone safe and for it to be less chaotic, and we can share some, you know, personal experiences that you've had helping doing what you do. You know, we have a guest that'll come on and who's actually done a lot of evacuation work in fires, helping people get out, and have her share her firsthand experiences of what works and what doesn't. But so hold those thoughts for people that are, because it can be, it's a lot when it really, you know, when you're looking at a natural disaster.
I don't think people understand. I mean, yes, you see it on TV and we see the social media posts and you're like, oh my gosh, that looks so crazy. But like when it's actually happening, it's something like mentally, I don't know that you can prepare for it. All you can do is do all these steps to make sure that it goes as smoothly as possible. But
right,
it's pretty intense.
So today we're going to talk about something that every horse owner needs to think about, though. And honestly, you know, I think to your point, right, most of us procrastinate over emergency preparedness because it's never going to happen to us, right? Disasters are things that happen to other people. We see them on the television. But the reality is, whether it's wildfires, flooding, hurricanes, tornadoes, you know, whatever your local flavor of disaster is, if you have horses, you need a plan. And you know, it might just be that you're traveling from, you know, point A to point B, for example, going to a show and happen to find yourself going through a state that suddenly there's a tornado, right? I mean, there's, you know, you may not live in a, like myself, I don't live in an area where we have a lot of natural disasters, but you may unwittingly find yourself experiencing one. So I think it's worth thinking about, you know, and how you would plan. So you need to have a plan.
Yeah, and I think it's, important. I think we all say, oh yeah, I sort of have a plan in my head and this is what I would do. But you need an actual plan. It needs to be practiced. It needs to be documented. I've seen what happens when people don't have one. And, it can really be heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That there's they don't have the plan, and in trying to figure it out in the emergency, it's too late.
Right. Yeah, there's nothing worse. I mean, we've all had if only situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to be in that situation. If only I'd had a plan, or I'd known this, or I'd had this, the outcome would have been different. So let's walk through some of the key things that owners, and frankly, and don't have your horse owner, any animal owner, right, should be thinking of when it comes to disaster planning, right? This isn't just about your horse. It could be your barn cat, right? It could be any, it's not just horses. It applies to chickens, right?
We have lots of, goats. There's all kinds of times that we've been like, I have 16 horses and 3 chickens and a goat, right? Like, and it's like, okay, well, where are they going? And who's picking those up?
Yeah. So when it comes to disaster planning, right, starting with identification and documentation, I think that when we think about disasters, it's easy to jump straight to, well, we just need an evacuation plan, right? Like, I got to be able to get out of here. So what's my evacuation plan? However, I would argue that most of us are blissfully unaware of the realities of, what that plan will actually involve. And we'll get to that later. But I think that,
it's really easy to just think this wouldn't happen to me. Right. So, I think that, it's good we're going to go through these steps. Hopefully people can, do some takeaways with this and get themselves prepared just in case.
So whether you have to evacuate or not, like, one thing that you're gonna need, right, is documentation and identification for yourself and your animals. Like, so why is that important?
Well, during natural disasters, I mean, if you actually find yourself in one, it is almost inevitable that horses are going to get loose, trailers are going to get separated. Animals end up in facilities 20, 30, 50 miles from home. I mean, there's lots of times where one facility will open and it becomes full, and then they have to open a second facility. Your trailer goes to the first facility and it gets turned away, and your horses are even further away. You may not even be in that truck and trailer.
Right. You may not be the one evacuating your horse.
Right. Somebody else came to get them, and so they're getting. So you don't even know, in these moments, you don't even know where your horses are because they're not with you. That happens pretty frequently. So you might have to let them loose. You might have to cut fences. Like that. That's always, an option that, we don't want to have to get to, but it does happen. Permanent ID is what gives you the best chance of getting your horses back. And I'm not saying that people don't get their horses back, but it gets them. I mean, if you have a chestnut horse that has no markings on it,
well, I have a black, to a point, right? He's almost fully thoroughbred. I have a black thoroughbred, but no white on him.
Right, exactly. So, having your ID, the documentation, super important.
So when you say permanent ID, I assume you're meaning like microchips, freeze brands, brand inspection documents, if you're in a brand state, things like that, right? That can't be separated from the horse. Yeah.
Microchipping's universal. So any large animal vet, rescue organization, they can scan for it. That gets done in the neck, in the horse's neck. So that's a super easy way that any vet can put in for you. And, it just lives under the skin. Freeze brands, also excellent. They're visible from a distance. They can get scanned quickly in a crowded evacuation. Lip tattoos. I mean, lots of thoroughbreds have lip tattoos, but they can be tricky to read. They fade over time.
And not particularly easy to read in a stressed horse, right? That's anxious. Right. You've got to turn their lip upside down and have them stand still enough that you can make out this vaguely pin tattooed series of numbers. So, I mean, it's permanent. Right. It's always with the horse, but it's not super easy for identification purposes.
And the older the horse gets, the harder they are to read.
Yeah,
for sure.
Exactly.
Some states have brand inspections, which you mentioned above, and that is actually a requirement by the state. So a brand inspector comes out. This has nothing to do with a brand on your horse. Think of it more like a horse registry. So you do get brand inspection documents, So having those, it does have pictures of your horse on them. So that would be another option because it is registered.
Right. So if you don't have any of those and you're facing an emergency, right? Sometimes people will write directly on their horses. They'll use those like livestock grease stick markers, or I've even seen people like with permanent pen, right? Write their phone number on the horse's hooves. Yeah. And you got it fairly at the top of the hoof. I mean, obviously it takes a long time for the hoof to grow down, and permanent marker doesn't wear off super quickly. So that's a way you spray paint. Yeah.
I mean, there's lots of anything that's going to stay on, that you can get on there, you can write on it. Your Coggins also has pictures of your horse. If you have your recent Coggins, even if you have an old Coggins, that's going to have all the identifying information with the photos of your horse. So having that with you or on your phone or in your email, that's also another good form to have.
Right. And some people do duct tape, on their halters and write, their ID on their halters. Like we do that at Pony Club rallies, right? Put your name and your phone number on the halter. But there's an issue with that, right? In that if you do end up having to let your horse go, you need to take your halter off that horse when you let them go.
Right. So if in the event that you have to cut your fences or open your gates, you want to make sure that everything is off your horse, because whether they are in a fire or they're in a flood, you don't want them to get snagged and caught and hung up on anything. They need to be able to move freely. In a fire, the halters, if they're nylon, they can melt to the skin, cause more damage. There are like braid-in type identifications that you can, that are specifically for emergencies. There's lots of different types that you can buy that are on the market, and you can braid those into the mane, attach them into the mane, and that would be, if you do have to turn them out, that would be the way to do it. But definitely taking all your halters off, and don't put duct tape on the skin because it will melt.
Yeah, that's for sure. So that's that's identification, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got to have a way that you can identify your horse, and somebody who finds your horse can figure out who the horse belongs to. What about documentation? Right? You mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned, having brand inspection documents if you're in a brand state, Coggins and things. What records should people have?
Their vaccination records, any type of medical records that you have. Ideally, if you have registration papers, having those with you. Photos. A lot of people don't take confirmation photos, both sides of their horse with, when you do your Coggins, they do both sides.
Unlike you and me, who are obsessively taking confirmation photos every month and comparing our horses to see how they're physically changing.
Right. Lots of times people take pictures with their horse's tack on or with their fly sheets on or something funny. But having a good confirmation from both sides, front and back, showing any type of unique markings, any type of scars on them. You're walking around a facility. Again, you have a black thoroughbred. There's 300 horses there and you're looking for your horse, or you're out of town and you call your friend to go look for your horse, right? Like maybe you know your horse really well, but if somebody else is looking for your horse, you need to have something to show them to be able to identify it.
Right. So having a current, we've talked about having, Coggins paperwork, but having a current Coggins and the associated paperwork is a good idea, because if you have to evacuate across state lines, which depending on where you live could be a reality that you just decide, the distance you have to travel takes you across a state line, those, the state may require you to have a Coggins to cross that state line. So having a current Coggins, and Coggins, I think they last like a year, typically. So it's worth doing, once a year. And why you should have paper copies of the documents, I think it's really worth also storing them digitally, right? Which might be cloud storage, or you could even, if you don't like using the cloud, just email them to yourself, right? So that you, and sharing them, you mentioned a friend, potentially, like if you've got another contact, like sharing, if you're going to be evacuating, if your evacuation plan is to go to Susie's house, then maybe having, sharing those documents with whoever your kind of evacuation buddy is, so that they're in multiple places, I think is a good idea as well.
Right. And, in the event that your barn burns down, your house burns down, like all those paper files are going to be gone. So even just taking a picture of them with your phone and putting them into your photos, right? That's an easy way. If you don't want to email them, at least you have something digital.
Right. So getting your documentation in order is something we could all do this weekend, right? I mean, it's straightforward. There's really no reason to not do it, right? It's like you should all, have it all with you. If your horse needs to be microchipped, you decide you want to freeze brand it, you need a current Coggins, you're going to have to schedule that with your vet. Again, you could do that today, unless you're listening to this on the weekend. But get that scheduled. And while you're at it, make sure that your horse is fully vaccinated, because horses coming, you're potentially going to be coming into evacuation centers. They're going to be coming into contact with horses from all over who knows where. They're going to be stressed. Their immune systems are going to be stressed, right? That makes them really, their risk for catching something contagious is much higher. It's a recipe for picking up communicable diseases. Especially as, let's be honest, biosecurity may be lax when things are chaotic. We're not really thinking about not sharing hoses, right? Before we did an episode recently where we talked about biosecurity, and yes, it's all great, but when it comes down to it, and you've got horses coming into a main facility, in a hurry and it's chaotic, that's probably not something people are worrying about too much, right? So make sure that your horses are vaccinated for, all the normal things. And then make sure they're also up to date with tetanus. Because if you do have to set them free, the chances are they're going to come into contact with debris, whether that's debris in water with flooding or flying debris in a hurricane or whatever, right? I mean, their chances of getting cuts, especially puncture wounds, is quite high. And obviously, tetanus is in the ground. Horses are actually quite sensitive to tetanus, more so than people. So make sure your horses are up to date on their tetanus, making sure that they're up to date on all of the diseases that are carried by mosquitoes. Because again, if you've got flooding and you're left with standing water in a warm climate, the chances are you're going to have a lot of mosquitoes, especially in the summer months. So making sure they're covered for West Nile, Eastern and Western encephalitis, those diseases, that's important. Rabies, right? So not only are our domestic animals going to be impacted by this natural disaster, but wildlife in the area will be too. And so the chances are that your livestock may come into contact with wildlife at an increased rate. And so it's possible they may come into contact with rabid animals. So making sure you're vaccinated against rabies. And these are all core vaccines. You should be having these anyway. But,
we're not going to get into the whole,
people let things slip.
Right. But I also want to say that when you go into these facilities...
But check the last time your horse was vaccinated.
Okay. When you go into these facilities, you're going to have volunteers that don't have any biosecurity training. This is not a show facility where everybody went and got their horses done. There's animals coming in from all over. You have no idea about their vaccination status. You have volunteers that might be filling water buckets. They don't know not to pet a horse's nose and then pet the next horse's nose, right? Like they're going to be handling maybe cattle, maybe goats. Like there's just a lot of... It's a very easy way for transferable disease to get transferred. So you can't control everything, but you want to be as prepared as you can for your own horse.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about another piece, which is getting to know your community, where you live.
Yes. So, community is everything in a large animal emergency. And you cannot do this alone, and you shouldn't have to. And trust me, if it happens, you're not going to want to do it alone. So getting to know the community is number one priority.
Right. So let's start with the basics, right? Ideally, what do people need to set up before disaster season, with their community?
Okay. So I don't know if you know this, but all counties in the U.S. are required to develop and maintain an emergency management office. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. No, I didn't.
Yep. And you can register with your county emergency management office as a large animal owner.
Didn't know that either.
Right.
I'm learning three things today.
Many counties are actively building large animal registries so that when there are disasters, responders know which properties have horses and how many. And if you're not on that list, you're invisible to the people who are trying to help you. So maybe they happen to go to your neighbor's house because they're registered and they see there's horses there. But if you live like I do, with my closest neighbor being 2 miles down the road,
right,
probably nobody's going to drive by and find me.
Right, and you're off set back off
half
the
a
road.
mile off the road, right?
No one's seeing you,
Right.
which has its pros and cons. So, okay, so getting registered with these county folks, I mean, it costs nothing, right? And it's interesting because years ago when I worked in epidemiology at UC Davis, we were doing a bunch of animal disease modeling, and we interviewed a lot of livestock owners. We needed to kind of figure out, same thing, how many livestock there were, where they were, so we could draw maps and kind of create simulations of disease outbreaks and stuff, right? And many of the owners were really skeptical with sharing their information. I mean, we were not a government organization, but we were affiliated to the state, and they were very concerned about talking to us. And, I understand this caution. However, I also remember there was a really bad winter storm around that time. I don't remember where it was. I live in Colorado. I don't remember. And there was real concern because a lot of grazing livestock were cut off and didn't have access to feed. And the state emergency folks were actually sending up helicopters with hay bales and dropping bales of hay into ranches where they knew there was livestock. Right. But they only knew the livestock were there because the ranches were registered with the state and that they knew how much stock they had. Right. So to your point, I mean, these things are really set up to help people in emergencies.
Yeah. Definitely sign up with your county's emergency alert system too. You can get text or email notifications for evacuations and road closures. Like in a fast-moving natural disaster, you might have 20 minutes. So getting an alert an hour earlier changes everything. That alert's going to say, you're in a pre-evacuation. And so you at least know that the fire, the wind direction, whatever the natural disaster is headed your direction. So you can start preparing. And we always tell people, like, if you have horses or any livestock, when you get the pre-evac, you need to load up. Like, you're not waiting until it's evacuation time. Like, that's going to be too late if you have to load horses in the trailer. Who cares if you load the horses in the trailer and the evacuation gets canceled? Turn around and drive back home. That is a much better option than waiting until it's time to evacuate and standing there with a horse that's not getting in the trailer and the fire's on you.
Yeah. And we have some, that's just so hard on everybody. When you wait until the last minute. So what about local large animal rescue teams?
Yeah, so every state has them, though not every county has them. So in Colorado, there are some county level CART teams, community animal response teams, that are incredible. They bring trailers. They have training in horse handling under stress. They know the roads in the area, and they know who your local team is and how to reach them within that area. So you can reach out to them at any time and get to know them and be affiliated with them. So these groups are government affiliated. They do have actual training.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And this is something else every listener can do right now, which is download the Watch Duty app on your phone.
So is this specifically is Watch Duty just for fires, or does it do other things?
Fires and flood. It's constantly growing, but it does right now cover fires and flooding.
Okay.
And when you download the app, if you go to the menu on the left-hand side, you can select notifications and you can put in your county. And this app will send you notifications of fires and floods. The app gets updated in real time with evacuations, pre-evacuations, any open shelters, any closed road, and the firefighter activity. So it has a lot of great features you can turn on, like you can see the satellite imagery, so you can actually look at the terrain. You can put the wind direction on, so you can see if you're watching a fire, you can see which way it's actually headed based on the wind. It'll tell you what the air quality currently is also. This app has been a game changer for the Colorado wildfires. I mean, we rely on it so much for the group that I work with. And that's what we refer everybody to, for real-time updates instead of us having to update every single post that we put up.
Yeah, and I actually used this indirectly through you a couple of years ago. And I was taking a horse to our trainer's facility, which is about an hour and a half away from our barn, and is up right on the edge of the national forest. So when you think national forest in Arizona, we're talking saguaro cacti. We're not seeing so just anyway, at least down at our level of the valley. And I was driving along and we looked off in the distance. There was this huge plume of smoke. And we kept driving and we were getting kind of closer to it. And I suddenly had this sinking feeling that I was like, am I driving my horse into a fire? Like that is not, and
that's not the direction you want to go.
Right. And so I'm driving my truck and trailer and I'm thinking, well, I'm not quite sure what to do. So what do? I phone Jill, who is in Iowa. And I say, hey, Jill, can you see if there's a fire in this location in Arizona? And you went on the Watch Duty app. And it was there, and you were able to tell me that, yes, in fact, there was a fire. It turned out it was actually quite close to the barn. I mean, it was not super close. It was going in the opposite direction at the time. But we continued. We got to the facility. We did unload the horse and put him in a stall so he could just kind of decompress for a bit. But I didn't know. I was planning to leave my trailer and at the trainers. And we sat for a couple of hours with the truck and trailer hitched up, watching that app, to see whether or not we needed to actually load the horse up and leave. And meanwhile, I had actually I phoned the trainer to let her know. And, other people in the barn were kind of starting to make plans of what we were going to do if we needed to leave. But yeah, it's a super app to have on your phone. And we now have it on our phone. And what about your immediate community, like your neighborhood level community?
Yeah, I think having a buddy system is probably like the most impactful thing you can do. Pair up, if you have other horse owners nearby, sometimes you don't, sometimes you do, pair up with them, get to know them. The online community forums can be great for this. Sharing trailer capacity. I mean, maybe you have a 2-horse trailer and you have 4 horses.
Right.
I mean, that's a reality, though. There's lots of people that don't have a horse trailer or have more horses than they have horse trailer spots. So you may need a friend. There's never a guarantee that when you evacuate that you can take 2 horses and the roads will still be open for you to go back and get the other 2. So, it's a reality that happens all the time.
Another reason why you should leave at the pre-evacuation stage.
That's correct.
Because you probably will be able to go back in and get the other horses, maybe. More likely than if you wait until the end.
Yeah, so checking on each other, you also want to, maybe they're having trouble getting their horses loaded. Maybe you have trouble getting your horses loaded. So, talking to each other, letting each other know about the pre-evacuation, having a communication protocol. If the cell trailers or if the cell towers go down, do you have a backup? I mean, that obviously can happen, especially tornado, hurricanes, things like that. The cell towers do go down.
And many of us don't have landlines anymore.
No.
Jill's like, what's a landline? I haven't had one of those in a long time.
Yeah.
But, at some point, good old-fashioned paper is really useful, right? At least for, keeping numbers, having that to be able to take with you as well. I think that just raises that point of if you're relying on all of your things being in your phone, I mean, your phone at some point, battery might die. You might not be able to make phone calls from your phone. So having important phone numbers kept somewhere else is probably smart as well.
I think that. I also, when I was in Colorado, and again, it's just different. And anybody in Colorado can say this, during fire season, your truck and trailer is just hooked up. You don't go to bed at night without your truck and trailer hooked up. It doesn't matter how good you are at hooking it up. Nobody's good at hooking up a truck and a trailer when there's ash falling on you, So I always had a list I had an envelope, a big one, manila envelope in my trailer. It had my checklist in it for evacuation. It had my copies of all my documentation, and I kept that right inside the trailer door so that anybody could grab it. If I wasn't there, somebody could grab it. So yeah, having everything written down and in your trailer for in the event you have to go, it's not the time to be looking for it. So you can update that whenever, but again, when it's time to evacuate, it's really hard to think about all this stuff. The things you think you're going to know, just have them in a place and be able to just grab it, because it's hard to think clearly when it's actually happening.
Yeah. And, to your point is, you mentioned updating, and I think that's, making sure whatever documentation, if you're somebody who is organized and you already have this put together, periodically going through it and making sure it's still current is important, right? People change their phone numbers. I mean, if you were somebody's buddy in Colorado, you're not much use to them anymore. You don't live there, right? So if they have you in their plan and that's what's in their trailer is phone Jill, she'll come get my, come get my goats for me or whatever. Well, you don't live there anymore. So that needs to be updated. So checking it periodically to make sure it's current, I think is a good idea. So, all right. So we've got ID, your paperwork's in order, and you've got a good community network sorted out. So let's get to the actual evacuation plan because, this is probably the centerpiece of being prepared. Yet sadly, I think very few people actually have a well-documented evacuation plan. I mean, you mentioned earlier, people sort of have a vague idea in their head, right? But they haven't written it down and it's not actually thought out. I remember, I think it was my daughter was given an assignment in English. She wanted it like 4th grade. And it was like, write instructions to somebody on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Right? And so what they all did was, well, you take your bread and your peanut butter and your jelly and you put the peanut butter on one slice and the jelly on another slice and you put the two together. And the answer was no, right? First of all, you have to go to the pantry and you have to get the peanut butter. Then you have to go to the cupboard and you have to get the jelly or whatever. Then you have to get a knife and a chopping board. Or whatever, and a plate. It's all the things that you do that you don't even realize you do. But
And during an evacuation, you might not even be home. Somebody else might have to do this for you. And, if you're out of town and you have a farm sitter that, they're good with the horses, they may have never driven a truck and trailer. They may have never put a horse in a trailer. They have no idea. So, you need to have all these things written down, as much documentation as you possibly can to help somebody if it's not you there doing it. Or if you're so stressed out when it happens that you actually need to look at the steps to remember how to do stuff. That does happen too.
Yeah, that absolutely. In the moment when you're panicking, it's very reassuring to just be able to follow a list. So you mentioned at the start that you help coordinate evacuations. What do you think? What's a pretty common thing that people get wrong?
Not having a destination.
That'll be a big one.
People have a vague idea of they'll take their horses somewhere. A shelter always gets opened up, right? But having a relationship with a destination that is not a shelter. So you have a friend that lives 30 minutes away. They have a pasture you can put your horses out in. They have extra stalls. There's a boarding facility. Having an actual place that you're going to go that isn't whatever is set up for everybody else to go to, I think is probably the biggest thing.
And that's ready and willing to take you.
Right. That has space for you. I mean, just saying I have a friend that has a horse and I can go there. Well, if they have no fencing up, if they have no pastures, if they don't have extra stalls, they don't have a round pen to put your horse in, what are you going to do? Leave your horse on the trailer when you get there? I mean, you still have to find somewhere to go. You may not be going home. I mean, if your house is gone, it might be quite a while before you're going home. So having a destination, deciding what that destination is going to be and going there. I think that's something that's really important. Again, the fairgrounds will usually open up as a shelter. That's a great resource if you don't have anywhere else to go, but it is a high stress environment. We said this before, there's going to be all different types of livestock. There's going to be different people. There's going to be volunteers there that want to help that have no livestock experience. There's going to be trailers coming in at all hours of the night, all times of the day. And again, if this is your only resource, use it. But if you can come up with a safe place that's also that isn't going to be evacuated, it can't be your friend 5 miles down the road because there's a chance that they're going to get evacuated also. Right. But it might be a better option to have that planned out ahead of time than having to go to the fairgrounds or somewhere else.
And not just for your horse, right, but for you as well, right? I mean, just imagine, I would be it would be so much more reassuring to me that, my horse is at your house. I can come to your house. Your life is carrying on as normal. you're calm, you're relaxed, your barn is calm and relaxed, versus every day I'm visiting the, fairgrounds or whatever, and it's complete chaos and everybody there is going through some level of trauma, right? And every animal is it's your own mental health as well as your horse's stress level. Finding that, which again takes us back to having that network, knowing your neighbors, knowing people in your community that you can go to. So step one is know where you're going.
Yeah. Identify at least 2 places that are further, one that's fairly close, because you may, the fire could get under control, the wind could shift, whatever, and then one that's further away. You want to call them ahead of time. You want to ask what they accept, what paperwork they're going to require. If they're going to charge a fee, lots of times people don't charge a fee during this. They're just going to open up stalls and take you. There's lots of equestrian centers that if they do have, boarding facilities that'll take emergency horses if they have open stabling. Some showgrounds are going to open up, the fairgrounds. But the bottom line is, for evacuation to go as smoothly as possible, you need to know where you're going, and the people need to know that you're coming.
Right? Yeah, for sure. And how about getting there? Like, what about route planning?
Yeah. So obviously we have no control over roads get closed.
Right.
They're going to get closed fast if the fire's there. The Watch Duty app will tell you what roads have been shut down.
The same with flooding, right? Or any disaster. Yeah. I mean, it's not just fire. We keep talking about fire, but I want people to realize, like, that's maybe just because you personally are very focused on fire, but this is true of, we've all seen videos of like flash flooding and people standing on a road and just watching, and now the road's got half a mile of water going across it. The road's gone. Exactly. So have a route and have a backup route, and drive them. Make sure, like, you might go down one route. Can you turn your trailer around if the road closes in front of you? Like you said, if the road washes out, you're going to have to get your trailer back down the road or turned around. We see this all the time in Colorado on the mountain roads. They're 1-lane roads. Either they get closed, so people are going and then they get closed and then they have to figure out how to turn around, or they're just closed from the get-go. And then if you wait too long and the road gets closed, you're stuck. Because there's not. Raises a good point. We may have mentioned this when we did our trailer safety episode. I think we spoke briefly. Like, get comfortable reversing your trailer. I know we can all be a bit bougie and just sort of avoid it and get out. And, there's some nice person who'll just get in your cab and reverse it for you at the horse show if you get stuck, in a pickle and you don't really want to do it. But at the end of the day, if you have a truck and trailer, you need to know how to drive that thing forwards and backwards.
Right. And there's lots of places like, if you live in
the road is closed, you got to be able to turn around.
Yeah. And if you live in an area where you know that roads flood, know which ones flood. If you're in a flood area, the chances are that if that road normally floods, it's going to be really flooded if the whole area is flooding. And then know where the low bridges are so that, if there are any low bridges, that can your trailer get under it? How tall is your trailer? Or is the water going over the bridge? If you need to go over
don't just rely on your GPS. Yeah. Right? Don't just rely on your GPS.
Yeah.
Because they're not thinking about trucks and trailers and things. So what about the order you load horses? Like, giving that some thought?
Yeah. This is...
Is that something that's worth thinking about?
Yes, absolutely. So know your horses. Know who's a bad loader. Who's going to kick when they're trailered next to a stranger, who's the herd boss, whose departure is going to get every other horse upset and put them in a panic. I think if you've got a lot of horses to load, you need to know what order everybody's getting loaded and what trailer they're getting loaded in, and practice that, right? If you're at a boarding barn and there's 40 horses and there's 6 trailers, where's everybody going? Just saying, like, we're going to evacuate, that doesn't work. So which horses can go in the trailers? If you have a horse that doesn't get in a straight load or doesn't get in, that all needs to be planned out. So the worst time to discover your horse won't load is when it's time to evacuate. This is not the time to be teaching your horse how to load.
No, and, practicing regularly, right? We're all guilty of, I've, had an experience where, you were loading a horse to go to a show and somebody said, oh, this is going to be, a disaster. The horse took 20 minutes to get in the trailer last time. And I was like, well, when was last time? And they were like, well, a month ago, we went to the last show. And I said, well, how's it been going with practicing? And they just looked at me blankly like, well, we haven't been practicing. And I just like, oh, great. And sure enough, it turned out to be a total disaster. In fact, we never actually got the horse in the trailer and we didn't get to go to the show that day. So, you need to practice loading regularly.
Yeah. I mean, and I can't stress this enough. Like, load your horses. I mean, and here I'm guilty, right? I have a brand new horse. I haven't pulled my trailer out. He was always traveled in a straight load. I have a slant load. I'm equally as guilty right now that I haven't pulled my trailer out to see if my horse will even get in it. But load your horses randomly, not just in the middle of show season, not on a sunny day where there's no wind. I mean, if there's a natural disaster happening, the weather is not going to be a beautiful day, right? There's going to be ash, there's going to be smoke, there's going to be rain, it's going to be wet. Who knows what's going to be happening? There might be thunder, there might be lightning. So you need to do it in all these different weather environments.
Right.
If it's an option, practice loading in any kind of trailer. Like if you're at a boarding facility and you always go in a straight load, will your horse get in the slant load? You don't have to drive them anywhere. Just see if they'll get in the slant load. Will they do a step up? Do they get on a ramp?
Yeah, I mean, funny story. I ended up buying a new trailer, right? Because I had a step up straight load. Yeah. And my thoroughbred would not get in it. Like, I mean, I did get him in it a couple of times, but the more I put him in it, the less he would get in it. And I remember one day walking around the back of the property, my barn owner had her slant load step up with the back open, and I asked if I could pop him in there. Dude just jumped straight in, walked back around to my trailer, 5 feet away, dead stop, will not move. And I was like, okay, I don't have a trailering problem. I don't have a trailering problem, but I have a trailer problem. Like, he doesn't like my trailer. And ultimately, I actually ended up buying a different trailer. But, to your point, like, you need to know, if you don't own a trailer, your horses need to be able to really get into anything, or at least clearly know what they won't get into.
I will tell you that if a volunteer comes to pick up your horse, so if you don't have a trailer and a volunteer comes to pick up your horse, it's not their job to teach your horse to get in the trailer. You will have 5 minutes to get the horse on the trailer, and they will move on to the next horse. It is not their problem, and you should never expect. You can be as upset as you want to be. That is not the time for teaching, and a volunteer that has taken the time and the danger that they've put themselves in, their truck and trailer in, to come and get you in a situation, it is not their responsibility. And when I say you're going to have 5 minutes, that's it. And they move on. So You really need to be prepared for that. And that is a reality that if you don't have a trailer, and lots of people don't, that's fine. But your horse needs to be able to get on anything, because there's no guarantee of what trailer is going to show up for you. If it's a straight, if it's a slant, if it has a ramp, if it's a step up. They just have to get in. The
saying, beggars can't be choosers, was never truer, right?
Right.
So what about you physically can't evacuate all your horses at this time? I mean, nobody wants to think about that, but
I know. So yeah, if you have more horses than you have trailers and you have to take some and leave some, you're going to need to, make a decision of which horses are staying and which horses are going. You may or may not be able to come back and get these horses. So you're going to also have to decide that, is the fire, did you go on pre-evac and you're going to have time to come back? You still have a lot of time to get out of there. If not, you need to get your horses prepared to be let loose, to be turned loose on the property.
Right.
Okay, so in the event that you are going to have to leave and you have more horses than you have trailer space, part of your plan needs to be about having a shelter in place plan, right? So know which area of your property is the most defensible, clear of dry vegetation, away from structure, if it's a fire.
So I think we should clarify for people, like, when we say most defensible, what does that actually mean?
So when you're looking at your property, and again, every property is going to be different. where's the vegetation? If you have a property that has timber on it, right?
Yeah.
That timber is going to be likely to catch fire.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if your horses are standing in the middle of a field where there's nothing around them, that's going to be your defensible area, right? Like that's going to be the protection. Whereas if there's wind coming up, if the fire's moving really fast, the more fuel that it has, right? So in those, let's think about your horse pasture for a second versus a field of long grass. Right. We talk about this all the time, right? Like you should let your grass grow so that your horses have something to eat. We all know that most horse pasture is completely chewed down. There's no fuel in that pasture if you're maintaining your pastures that are going to catch on fire, right? That's a defensible.
Overgrazed pasture is good defensible space.
Right. In the event of fire,
advocating you to overgraze your pastures, but yeah, to your point though, it's like knowing what areas.
Right. So thinking about that, like if your pastures are dry, if it's August, if there's a really tall, dry grass, there's a bunch of trees, all those types of things, that's all fuel for a fire. If we think about floods, do you have a pasture that's high, right? Which pasture is going to be the best one to put the horses in? Put them in the highest pasture you have. Don't put them in the one that's the bottom where all the water is going to go to. Right. So same thing, right? Like you want to think about where's going to be the safest place to put these horses if you have to leave and take some horses and come back for the other ones.
And it might be, if you have an outdoor arena, it might be an outdoor arena.
Right.
Because it's sand and it doesn't catch fire. So again, just even thinking about spaces where you wouldn't normally turn horses out, where you have to look at your property through a different lens.
Right. And that's part of the planning process, is figuring that out. So, and I think that is really something. If you put your horse out in the same pasture every day, you're probably going to be like, when it's time to turn them out, just stick them in there because that's where they always go. But that might not be the best choice for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, I mean, we're talking about making a plan. All this has to be written down, right? It's Joey the thoroughbred goes here. Sammy the donkey goes with him,
Right.
Bill the goat goes somewhere else. It's like somebody needs to be able to come into your property and execute this for you if you're not home.
Or you can't get back to it.
Right, about you're at work or something, right? So we talked about putting ID on the horses, right? If you have to leave the horses, having an ID. But again, having a plan, like opening gates, right? Cutting fences. Like if, again, you don't necessarily want them to have to be trapped in a small space.
Yeah, and you need to leave those notes for people too, because a lot of people, if they let horses out of stalls, if they're not horse people, they don't know they need to close the stall, they need to close the barn. The horses will go back into the barn every single time. So that is their safe place.
Right.
So that all needs to be written down, that, this is where the fences, if you've got to take the fences down, this is where they need to be taken down. Here's the tools to do it. If you board at a facility, the boarders and the owners need to know what the plan is and how to execute it. If you board your horse, don't assume that the barn owner has a plan. Ask them if there is an evacuation plan in place. And if there isn't a plan, you need to have a barn meeting and come up with a plan. And it's really important that you're a part of this. And, if you want to be the one that heads this up, help the barn owner do this. You can contact your local fire department. They will come out and help you with this. There's lots of great resources out there that can come and help you come up with a plan for your barn.
Yeah, and having those conversations before they're necessary, right? It's like with everything, like it all needs to happen ahead of time. It's part of the preparation. And yeah, I mean, everybody needs to know what the plan is, what horses are going with who's towing what trailers, like all of that for big facility needs to be in place. So if you've got your facility plan in place, we do get to the, logistics of getting horses off the property.
Yeah, your trailer is your lifeline.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to need to rely on, your trailer or whoever's trailer is taking your horse.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's worth saying that, I mean, I've been in big boarding barns and there's often a lot of trailers standing around, but there's not a lot of trucks, right? Because people take their trucks home with them. So figuring that out, you might, that's what we all go to our barn and go, wow, there's 20 trailers here, but when there's an emergency, that's great. How are you going to get them off the property, right? So you do actually need vehicles to pull them, and having that plan as well, and making sure those trailers are safe, right, and set up. So we just did an entire episode on trailer safety, which I would encourage everyone to listen to, because we cover a lot of material there, and making sure that your trucks and trailers are ready to roll. You mentioned having your truck and trailer hitched up all the time during fire season. I think it's worth noting, making sure like your truck actually has gas in it. Like my truck is only used for towing and sits around a lot of the time. And I try to always put it away with a full tank of gas. But you don't want to suddenly be like, oh, I need my truck and now I have to go to the gas station. That's not well prepared. So I show, and I love a good packing list. I'm a huge believer in lists. It's kind of how I make sure, just my mental checklist we talked earlier about, they're quite calming when you're nervous, having that list. So what are some items that folks should have on an emergency kit list for evacuation planning?
Yeah, I think thinking about it in 72-hour minimum, because it's not uncommon to be evacuated for that long. You may end up being longer than that, but can you sustain your horse for 3 days without a resupply? That's a good baseline.
Right. And I think from, obviously being a nutritionist, I would think about nutrition, but that's a big part of that, right? So feed, maybe water, hopefully obviously where you're going will have water, but at least 3 days of hay at a minimum per horse if you can swing it. Obviously that might not be possible if you've got a lot of horses. And critically, trying to take the same forage with you that your horse is used to eating, because we've talked about this in other episodes, or you don't want to make sudden forage changes to unfamiliar forages, especially during a time that's already stressful because you really increase your colic risk. The gastrointestinal tract just doesn't appreciate surprises at the best of times, especially not when it's stressed. But so trying to take your own hay with you if you can.
Yeah, I think it's important to say about the water also. You said, take your water. You may be in a situation like I was when Hurricane Irene and Hurricane Sandy. We had 16 days without electricity. Well, if you have well water,
right,
and you don't have electricity, you don't have water. So where are you getting your water from? So having a backup plan for that, that you may have to, maybe you're okay at home, but it's still an emergency and you have to get your horse's water. Where are you going to be getting water in the event that you don't have any?
And I think, if you rely on well water, that's a really great point, is it's worth considering, even if you're not having to evacuate, and even if you're not actually physically hit by the disaster, it's worth considering, if you have animals relying on your well, do you get yourself a generator, right? That you can run your pump without power.
I have all kinds of ways of getting water when you don't have power, but we're not going to get into that. But yeah, having a generator, sure. If you can have a generator, that is one way. And you said about, hey, if you can grab a bag of grain, whatever your horse is on, great, grab the bag. If not, you can run to the feed store and you can get it. So I would be less worried about the grain, the supplements, things like that. But the hay, lots of times at the fairgrounds, people are just bringing in hay from whatever. So you're not going to have a choice. If your horse is on Timothy, they may end up getting orchard and alfalfa mix. So if you can grab some, great. If you don't have time, you're going to just do your best.
Yours is going to be fine without their balancer for a week.
Yeah.
They'll be just fine. The only time I would say is if you have, say, senior horses, or horses, for example, have to eat pellets or something like that, that's a time that I would be a little more prepared for, you need to have bags of pellets ready to go, that kind of thing, or senior feed ready to go, whatever.
You don't have bags of pellets. Just grab the whole bag.
Exactly.
We're not making bags.
No, that's what I meant. Yeah, good to clarify that. I'm certainly not implying you're going to make baggies. I mean, take the whole down 50-pound bag with you.
Yeah.
And probably multiples if that's what your horse is relying on. Obviously, water's trickier because it's heavy, but at least having enough water, and we talked about this in the trailering episode, to get you to your destination. Buckets, right? Take buckets with you.
Yeah, buckets are really important. Actually, yesterday, the open shelter in Colorado for the Aspen Acres fire, they put a call out for buckets. So we had volunteers going down to get buckets down to them. But it's something, maybe you keep extra buckets in your trailer, maybe you don't. But definitely this is something that should be on your list, at least 2 buckets to go with you. Make sure you have a first aid kit that includes what you need to deal with wounds. You don't know what kind of wounds, if you're in a fire, if it's going to be burns, if you're in a flood, if it's going to be skin sloughing off. Have something, just regular cuts and things like that. Talk to your vet about what you should have in your kit and what should be on hand. And if you have a horse that's on medication, thyroid meds, whatever the case is, you want to be sure to grab those and bring them with you.
Yeah, pergolide for Cushing's comes to mind, right? Like that's a big one. So one thing I think that doesn't get discussed much is, we could go on and on, right? As far as things to have on your list, there's tons of resources, and I'm, but the resources are out there. Use the internet, like figure out what it is you need to have with you in these situations and put it together. But, one thing I don't see discussed as much in resources that are out there is actually sort of the mental preparedness for yourself going into these situations, right? And the behavioral preparation, for you and your horse.
Right. I mean, it's a really good thing to talk because it's hard to prepare for this. You don't know how you personally are going to behave in this situation, and it is very stressful when it happens. And for whatever reason, I always tend to be home by myself. My husband's traveling for business and I'm just there, and I'm like, oh, we're getting evacuated. Haha. But you need to know what type of person you are, right? Claire, you and I were both pretty level-headed. I think that we both would be, and we do fine in these types of situations, and we're methodical thinkers, but that's not the case for everybody, and especially if it's your first time. So this is something that you should think about within yourself, because it will go sideways. It can go sideways pretty quick. And
you don't know who you're going to be, unfortunately, until you get in that situation. But you should know yourself well enough to have an idea. And I've been unfortunate enough to be in a situation where I've both had a horse pass away in front of me and a human almost also pass away in front of me. Thankfully, they didn't. But it's being there in those moments. Not everybody is able to handle those moments. So there's all kinds of things you can do to try and help keep yourself calm and handle pressure. And they involve training yourself, basically, like exercises you can do to kind of calm your mind.
Yeah.
So whether it's breathing, grounding exercises, all kinds of things. But just as we talked about desensitizing your horses to tops flapping and, stuff, you have to practice them ahead of time.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to say, like, if you are too upset to load your horse, I mean, we all know that horses sense our, how we're feeling when we're stressed, when we're upset. It's okay to recognize that in yourself and hand the horse off to somebody else and let them load it. You don't have to be the one to do it. You just have to be the one to say that I can't do it. And, no judgment. In these situations, there's no judgment. Like, the main goal is to get everybody and the horses to safety. So it's okay to do that. Don't feel like that you have to, it's my horse, so I have to do this. You don't.
No, absolutely. That's really important to say. And because your horse is going to feed off of your emotion. You're their person. And so if you're freaking out, they're going to be like, why is mom losing her plot? It's like, what is going on? And so having somebody help you can really, really help. We covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah, I feel like, for me personally, like, I could just talk about this. We could just go on and on.
Oh, there's so much that we didn't cover.
I know. There's so much stuff that we didn't cover. And again, there is lots of good resources out there. If you Google equine emergency preparedness, you'll come up with lots of PDFs. I hope that this helps our listeners realize that the plan you make under pressure is a bad plan. So make it now. Make it when it's calm. Be prepared. Right. Know what you're going to do when it happens. Because chances are, it may not be a fire, it may not be a flood, but there's always a chance that you might have to evacuate for some reason.
Yeah. It could be, Southern California, right? Just had that chemical plant.
Right.
It could be anything. So it doesn't have to be a weather-related event. It could be anything. So we'll share some of the resources we've talked about for emergency preparedness in the show notes. If you haven't experienced, I'm sure many of our listeners have found themselves facing evacuation situations. If you have experience evacuating with horses, what worked? There's always hindsight, right? There's always things we wish we'd done differently. We'd love to hear from you. So reach out, share your thoughts, your experiences, and lessons learned on our social channels.
For our listeners, if you'd like to be a part of our conversation, please send your suggestions for future topics and equine nutrition questions to info@scoopandscale.com and is spelled out. You can also find Claire at clarityequine.com.
We know that if you're like us, you're probably listening to this while driving or doing barn chores. But when your hands are free, if you'd share it with your friends on social media and be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, it helps other horse lovers like you to find us.
For the Scoop and Scale podcast, I'm Jill Jackson.
And I'm Dr. Claire Tunis.
Thanks for riding along with us.